joining me to give us a school's perspective is the CEO of the Indian High Schools Group, Punit Vasu, who has been a guest on our show many times. But we've never talked to you about school buses, have we, Punit? Thank you.
No, we haven't. But thank you for having me once again. Long time no see, and really great to be back.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Let's find out a bit about how many kids at your schools use the bus. In what proportion is it, would you say?
So we have 13,000 learners that are part of the Indian High Group of schools. And I think the participation rate varies. So obviously amongst the younger children, we have an uptake of almost 80%, right? And I think we are placed in a very interesting position. Two of our schools are very close, located to the metro. So as a non-for-profit group of schools, we work very closely with our parents and our learners to see and make it easier for them to access the metro as well. So we have dedicated marshals that make it very convenient for our children, either using the school transport or the public metro transport.
I'm interested
and for
to
the
hear.
older kids, I would say the participation rate for the bus transport is lower because a lot of them use public transport, especially the metro.
That is cool, actually. That's so convenient to be able to use the public transport. But even that number that you just said there, 80%.
Absolutely, 80%.
I compare that to my school. To be honest, I don't know the exact numbers, but considering the number of cars and mums that I see every time I do pick up, I would say that it could be as little as 20% of people are using the school buses. Why do you think your families choose to use it?
I think the number one consideration that a parent makes when choosing bus transport, school bus transport, is safety, security, and safeguarding.
Okay.
So let's relive the journey that a child or a learner takes. The moment a child boards a school bus, for all practical purposes, and that's how we consider it, they're actually becoming a part of the school campus. So the school bus transport, for all practical purposes, is an extension of the school campus. And what is a parent looking at? A parent is looking at a very, very strong, safety blanket, security blanket, safeguarding, right? So I think our parents are very, very keen, like parents like you and me. It's no different, right?
Oh, yeah.
You want a safe mode of transportation, and a lot goes into the safety aspect of a bus. Other than the infrastructure, the tap-in, the GPS, but also picking your drivers, picking your bus attendants, the safety checks both locally and internationally, right?
Goodness, that's a lot to think about when it comes to it.
That goes in not just recruiting locally, but because you get a lot of drivers, as we call them pilots, and attendants that come from different parts of the world. So there's a lot of effort and investment that goes into that. The other aspect is, I think parents are very well aware in terms of the upkeep and maintenance that a school would put in. So we own a fleet of 200 buses.
So you manage your own bus fleet?
Yeah, we manage our own. That's absolutely right.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we take the responsibility to manage. That's why I said for us, it's an extension of our campus.
Gosh, and does that... there's always a big complaint about the bus companies that it's really expensive, like mind-blowingly expensive. I've spoken to several friends who, their biggest complaint is, if you're going to talk about it on the radio, can you talk about the cost? Because it's absolutely outrageous, they say. So how do you, as a sort of internal bus company school, how do you structure the cost? And is it a profit-making or is it not for profit?
Okay, so we're a non-for-profit group of schools.
So it's definitely not profit-making.
So for us, we have maintained a status quo, as I mentioned on your show earlier, for tuition fees, where we have not increased the fees for 6 years.
Amazing.
I'm proud to say that the Indian High Group of Schools has not increased bus transport fees for almost 4 years. Because post-COVID, there have been challenges. I mean, we all know that the biggest cost drivers are obviously salaries. And Dubai is a fast-growing city. And there is a very, very strong demand for qualified and well-trained drivers. So we are competing with all the other industries and all the other verticals in Dubai that need qualified drivers for transporting people on buses.
So they're demanding bigger salaries ultimately.
Absolutely. And again, you've got to look after their well-being.
Yeah, of course.
Let's focus on the point that these individuals are transporting the most precious commodity that you and I have, which is our children.
Yeah.
So our group of schools puts an extra effort to look after their well-being. What do we do? So we have the standard health insurance, right, which it's mandatory, and we go beyond in terms of giving what we think is a far better insurance. But we also give them life insurance, workman's compensation insurance, and also critical illness insurance. So what you're doing is when you look after your people, and when they're driving your children, they are well taken care of. So their well-being is looked after.
So it is possible, though, to break even, because that's essentially what you're doing. So it's possible to provide an effective bus service at a reasonable amount of money with good drivers.
Yes, but I think the caveat to that, and you mentioned earlier, again, we operate at an affordable price point, but the caveat that I mentioned, what your comment earlier with regards to the price in some of the schools or some of the operators, obviously it's a demand and supply equation. The fact that we have
80% of your children,
80% of our children taking our bus and opting for bus services, whereas in some of the other premium, super premium price schools, you probably have less uptake, and that's something which needs to be managed. And there is a whole set of requirements that we as bus operators have to maintain and align ourselves with the regulatory requirements.
And those are expensive, ultimately,
those
to
are
fulfill.
Expensive. We talk about fuel costs, and again, fuel prices in Dubai are dynamic, whereas your pricing and what you charge your consumers is not dynamic. So that can't be adjusted. So you almost have to have a very forward-looking approach when you do your pricing. There are requirements by the regulator, and we have a very forward-looking regulator with the RTA and the KHDA. But there is a requirement of having to replace your buses. There's a mandatory requirement to replace your buses after 15 years, irrespective of what condition they are in. So you're pretty much talking about having zero value then, book value, because you have to replace your buses after 15 years.
Goodness, there are quite a lot of rules and regulations that you're having to sort of juggle in this situation. I'd like to know about congestion around your school. Obviously, you've got quite literally thousands of pupils. That's thousands of families. With so many children using the buses, do you think that has had an impact on the amount of congestion around the school? Would it just be unmanageable if everyone was driving?
Absolutely. And like I said, we are blessed with two of our campuses being close to the metro. So either they use the metro, the public transport, or the bus transport. So that's convenient. The other school that is part of our group is located in a very nice residential cluster in Dubai Silicon OS. And again, that helps in terms of managing traffic and making sure it's not in a very busy, bustling commercial scene. Again, if priced well and if you're providing a high quality service, then you will definitely have a lot of uptake from parents. And that really does help contribute in reducing congestion. But we are in an interesting and a very fortunate position, I would like to say, that we have our learners being able to access both. And maybe other schools don't necessarily have that privilege, which is why it's either bus transport or parents driving their children to school, because they may not have access to public transport that easily.
Got in the studio with me Punit Vasu, who's the CEO of the Indian High Schools Group, who manage their own bus system. Punit, I promised I'd ask you about what you think about the idea of adverts in your buses. Now that you're allowed to do it, will you do it?
I think it's early days. We need to review, discuss that with our team of educators. But purely adding an educational perspective, right? There's a lot of stimuli that students are exposed to in today's day and age. The question that we would ask ourselves as educators is, do we want to add an additional layer of such stimuli inside the buses? I've had the pleasure of, in my childhood days, by traveling by school bus, and some of the most endearing friendships, some of the best conversations I've had have been with friends on the bus who were not part of my class. You almost have two sets of friends, right? You have your friends in the classroom, your classmates, and your busmates, if you're still in touch with a lot of them. So again, it's still very, very early, and it's also going to be very seasonal in terms of our advertising companies going to be having long-term associations with schools in terms of advertisement. You can expect a surge when it's back to school campaigns, right? But then what happens throughout the year? Right? What happens inside the bus? What happens outside the bus? What are the RTA requirements? And it's highly competitive as an industry. So you're pretty much competing, say, with public buses that can also have advertisements. And let's also factor in that school buses ply for a relatively shorter period of time on the roads compared to other modes of transport, like a taxi or what have you. And again, a very, very different audience.
Yeah, half the time they're sat motionless, aren't they, while the kids are at school?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, when we're talking about costs and when this brings it down, we also need to reflect that driver salaries, escort salaries, attendant salaries have to be paid for a period of 12 months, but buses run for a period of 10 months. But you've got to incur all those costs for a period of 12 months. So again, would an advertisement company advertise for a period of 12 months? Probably not, because you're pretty much closed for the whole of summer and 3 to 4 weeks for winter. So again, we would need to look at the impact that this will actually have in terms of for the for-profit schools revenue generation, and for us if it helps in generating a surplus. But definitely the educators would be very, very keen to see what kind of stimuli, because we as educators are encouraging moving away and from visual stimuli to reading,
Yes.
audio, looking outside the bus window, having dialogue and conversations, expression through language, and not necessarily having to see a screen inside your bus too. So, it's a wait and watch approach for us.